Okay, everybody, welcome back to the Jiu Jitsu Mindset. Here in Arizona today, we have a tournament. So Professor Lucas is away coaching the team, and you're stuck with me. Our team probably has a hidden advantage in that we have submission coffee here, which, as I've mentioned, is not considered a performance-enhancing drug. So if we come back with all the gold medals, you'll know why. I am reminded by my friends, I forget to tell you where to get it, but if you go to the jujitsumindset.com, you can join our mailing list, but you can also get submission coffee delivered monthly to you. We have been so privileged in who has come to spend time with us, and that's the case again this week. And so we're very grateful that Professor Shelby Young has taken time out of his day to come talk with us. Professor Shelby, thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I was doing my research, trying to get a sense of you and Balance Point and understand who I'd be talking to on the way in. And I have to say, as somebody who has an interest in the philosophical aspects of martial arts, jiu-jitsu, but martial arts in general, I was impressed with in the about section of your website, there was a lot of mention of things that I found very interesting from an ideas perspective. And so I thought I would start with that as a question. Perhaps you could talk a little bit about the ideas that attracted you to martial arts beyond the physical, philosophical ideas that attracted you, and then what impact those ideas had on you as a younger person and today. Like, how did your adoption of those principles shape your life?
Sure. Yeah, I got into martial arts around 11 years old. I was a really skinny, asthmatic, very angry kid. I
Okay.
I couldn't tell you exactly where that anger came from, but I definitely had a big chip on my shoulder. I never liked being called small or being thought of as weak or things like that. I
Yeah,
had an older brother, and he and I fought like cats and dogs, as we all do.
sure.
But luckily, I'd always been obsessed with Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris and Jean-Claude Van Damme and all the classics. And
Hmm.
there was actually a karate instructor opened a school a couple hundred yards down the street from where my parents lived. And
Okay.
so they got me a free month. I was hooked, and I just kept going with it. And that was Northern Chinese Shaolin Kenpo karate, which is a big mouthful to say.
Wow. Yes.
Um,
It's very specific.
and yeah, exceedingly specific. It was, I believe, it was technically part of like Ed Parker's system of
Oh,
Kenpo
yeah.
for
Yeah.
the people
Yes.
that are
Yes.
Kenpo nerds. Yeah. Jeff Hardy was my first instructor there. And he's an awesome guy. I just got to see him recently when I went up and visited my folks. And his son has taken over the school, and they're just absolutely great people. And luckily, he had a background in Japanese jiu-jitsu. So that was my first exposure to grappling as a martial art. And it's so funny to think back. So this was in the early 90s. So UFC had just come out, but you had to find like bootleg downloaded
Yes.
to everywhere,
Hmm.
and don't let your parents see that you're watching a thing. But that was the first exposure of, okay, so striking isn't enough, because like I started to feel pretty comfortable that, well, I can stand and trade, and especially again coming from, I got myself into a lot of fights that I probably never should have out on the
Okay.
school ground and parking lots and things like that, because I had a chip on my shoulder. I've always had a very sharp tongue and a big mouth, and that got me in a lot of trouble because I would talk a lot of smack, but I couldn't fight.
Hmm.
So I figured, well, I should probably bring that second part in order to deal with that. But then, yeah, once I got introduced to Japanese jiu-jitsu, and it was like, okay, yeah, but yeah, it's so, not a knock against Master Hardy at all, but to think of like how far things have come, it was so rudimentary at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I entered a tournament with basically a crappy double leg, a crappy guillotine, and a crappier armbar, and I managed to get second. And it was like, okay, cool. Like, I this jujitsu stuff down. And it's a joke I make now that no one person can know everything about any martial art. So anytime I meet somebody who's, oh, I know judo, I know taekwondo, I'm like, oh, really? Like the whole thing, the ins and outs, all of it. You got
Right.
that all down. That's impressive, because there's people who've been doing this for 80 years that don't have it down. So if you got it after 6 months of training,
Right.
like, good for you, bro.
Yeah,
Uh,
without a doubt. For me, the chess analogy is apt because you have thousands of years of chess strategy cataloged,
mhm,
and yet you still have people that figure out how to be dominant players in
mhm,
chess with the same information that everybody's working out of. And then we're talking
right.
about thousands of years, and so much written down. Um, and so that analogy of a physical chess game where you
Mhm,
have if you have 64 squares on the chessboard, how many variables does the human body have between each other? So multiply that times infinity, basically. So
Yeah.
if the permutations on the chessboard are this extraordinary number, it's like some more than like this grains of sand on the beach or whatever the number is, it's something huge.
Oh, no.
The physical permutations between two human beings in conflict with each other have to be just unspeakably enormous. So the notion that anything can be mastered truly, I think is as a perspective that doesn't serve anybody. The
No.
people that I've spoken to in this podcast that are the most expert that you could hope to be still perceive themselves as just starting. My learning is endless.
Oh yeah, and it's almost cliche at this point, but I love the idea of being the perpetual white belt. I'm sure that boy, even when you call me professor,
Yeah.
it makes me feel weird inside. I've been a black belt for 4 years now, and the amount, yeah, again, it's almost cliche, but the amount that I've learned since then
Yeah.
is insane compared to what I thought I knew before. It's what is that? Socratic ignorance.
Right.
What I know, I don't know, and then there's like the
Everything
infinite
else. Yeah. Yeah.
vastness of what I don't know, and that's always really cool. That I get to meet people from all different walks of life in jiu-jitsu that I never would interact with otherwise,
Yes.
and I'm constantly like, just teach me something. Show me new. What do you like in your game? How can I adapt that into mine if it fits? And if it doesn't, then okay, cool. But at the very least, I get exposure to it to then know what else is out there.
Let's go back to you as a kid and your
Oh,
evolution,
sure.
because
Yeah.
clearly the young scrapper who had a big mouth and then wanted to back it up with a fight game and all the rest of it isn't the man sitting in front of me. So at some point, as you continue on this journey, principles beyond self-defense, principles beyond fighting seem to make their way into your consciousness. And my perception is that changes you. So is it a moment that happens? Like something, is there an epiphany, or was it over time, just gradually jujitsu in particular? And it's funny you mentioned Ed Parker, like I'm 54. So in the early 80s and whatnot, I was involved in those things as well, which was a fun introduction to, you know, not only that martial art, but several others. Your approach to teaching and your place in the community seems to have this philosophical component. So I'm curious where that comes from.
I think you're right. I think it develops slowly over time. It's one of those things that I don't, there's a lot of times where I don't even realize that something is a tenet or principle or a philosophy of mine
Hmm.
until I have to find a way to articulate it.
Okay.
And I find that's the same thing with jujitsu, where there's so many things until I got into teaching almost full time now. There's so many things that you just do intrinsically or instinctually, especially after you've been on the mats for a long time, that then having to slow it down and have to teach it to somebody who's never done anything before
Yeah.
allows you to find that gradually. But as far as the philosophy side of things, it was, I think when I decided to retire from MMA was when I figured out who I wanted to be and what I wanted to get out of that. Cause like I said, in college, I was obsessed with the UFC. That was when the Ultimate Fighter debuted.
Yeah.
And I was, yeah, the cult leader trying to recruit my friends to being like, you need to come watch this. This is awesome.
Mhm.
And luckily, I think I did bring a few along. So if Dana White wants to send me a check for converting a few over there, I'm still
Absolutely.
great. He doesn't seem like the kind of guy that gives that out freely. But I remember I used to get really angry before fights, before MMA
Okay.
fights, where I would, work myself up into a frenzy because I played football in high school and I used that same mentality. Just even if I'm less skilled or, like you said, small and scrappy, I'm going to overwhelm you with aggression. I'm going to
Okay.
just, try to end it as quickly as possible. And that didn't work for the first few fights. And I had a good friend, John Ortolani, who's a black belt down in South Tampa, was a training partner of mine for a long time. And I was helping him warm up before one of his fights. And he was so relaxed and
Yeah.
so calm about it. And I was like, how are you not, again, I don't know any other way to do this than to just, be like a Viking berserker and just go after this.
Right.
And he's like, I'm a lacrosse player. That's not what we do. He's like, we're going to go get tacos after this. And it doesn't matter. It's like, it's every other day in the gym. That kind of allowed me to calm down and be more methodical with my approach to not just fighting, but kind of everything. And I started to approach my fights with the idea of like, I don't need to hurt this guy.
Mm.
I just want to see where does my skill set lie in relation to his. It's
Yeah.
like you said, it's a game of chess combined with a game of poker. Because with
Right. Right.
chess,
Yeah. Yeah.
all the moves that I can, but with Texas Hold'em, you don't know what cards I'm holding until I
That's true.
show.
Yeah.
So
Very good.
that's My professor, John Fain, who runs Triumph BJJ in Nashua, gave me that analogy, and I love it. I think it's a great way to go about it.
Yeah.
And then once I'd won a few fights and I didn't feel any different,
Right.
I realized that hadn't helped cure whatever was emotionally insecure inside of me that every fighter has that none of them like to really admit. Because
Right.
if you were fully emotionally secure and grounded and stable, you wouldn't feel the need to try to dominate another human. Oh,
Right.
that's my Deinsdorf first psychology degree on that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
But once I feel like, okay, whatever I'm looking for isn't in the cage.
Right.
Now I
Yes.
need to figure out who I am outside of this. And that's when I started to dig more into the philosophical side of it and try to figure out who am I if I'm not a fighter, if
Yeah.
I'm a martial artist, which they're very different things.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's the fighter versus the sportsman versus the martial artist. And
Right.
I, spent so much time, like you said, in the Ed Parker system and doing a lot of the traditional martial arts with Kung Fu, Jeet
Right.
Kune Do. Yeah. And there's a lot of cool stuff from that. I don't bag on any martial art. I think you can learn a lot from anything,
Mm-hmm.
but I think you need to recognize what is the purpose that you're doing them for and where do they have their shortcomings? Because like Tai Chi is beautiful,
Right.
but it's not a combat effective martial art. It's a
Yes.
lot
Right.
of
Yeah, no, yeah, and I think sometimes people insist a little too much as it relates to Tai Chi that this sped up becomes something more violent. I am curious about the quality of violence between like the MMA experiences and other types of fights because I was never an MMA fighter, so all of my experiences either we're talking about schoolyard violence or small street level violence or sport like boxing, but for me, the striking experiences versus jujitsu are pretty different and they carried a different like emotional quality to it. And it feels like minus military violence, street level violence that's extreme. MMA feels from a sport perspective the most violent of the experiences you can have out there. And I'm curious as I know you Muay Thai and all your striking skills versus perhaps jujitsu tournaments. Because jujitsu as the gentle art has a different, yeah, but has a different quality to it, even in my opinion, at least, than say like a Muay Thai fight. Like when I watch that, that has a tone to it that is unique. So as somebody who's experienced these different things, could you talk about like the differences because it's interesting to me that you calm down in the midst of an MMA world, right? Like that world probably pushes a person towards who you entered as the aggressive berserker style kind of mentality. It would seem to me that it'd be easy, particularly as a young man, to get oriented to that. It's interesting that it was seems like a peer mentor that kind of gave you this perspective shift that, hey, with a different internal experience of calmness, you actually can be just as effective as a fighter. And then you can start to move into this martial artist realm, which is, I don't know, maybe you were connecting the two. I don't know. Does that make any sense, that question? Like how much you talk about that?
No, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. There's a different rhythm and a different flow to every single martial art and every single
Yeah.
combat sport. Um, and yeah, even within that, like when you train with really traditional Thai strikers,
Hmm.
they're very calm the whole time because it's a
Oh, really?
game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially with, like my Thai coach is Patty Ivers, who fought over in Europe for a long time and is a wonderful guy. He's one of my best friends. I absolutely love that guy. And
Hmm.
he's Irish, so everything he says sounds way cooler. Um, but yeah, because in Thailand, a lot of times you're fighting multiple times a week. That's where you see guys have 300, 400 fights on their record is because it's just a job. It's something you're going to do. And so there's a different kind of mentality and respect with it that if you and I are drastically different skill levels and we're in a Thai boxing match and I know that I can destroy you at any given moment, I don't have to. I
Hmm.
can take my foot off the gas and you know it as well. So if we're having a 12 round fight and I've won the first 10 rounds, I don't need to keep my foot on the gas pedal and just murder you for the last 2 rounds because again, if we're in a small town, we're going to see each other around and that way I can fight tomorrow, you can fight tomorrow. We can both make money for our families and it's all
Right.
good.
Yeah.
As opposed to here in the US, your most active guys might fight 3, 4 times a year, depending
Right.
on how much damage you take and what leaps you're fighting and things like that. So it's very different. We're here again, the majority of stripers you're going to run into here are out for doing damage.
Sure.
And it's not a great way to have a long career. If your goal is to, again, to do this for a long period of time. And even then, everybody I talk to who's a young up and comer, I've got a couple of guys that want to do their first kickboxing match soon.
Hmm.
I'm like, you have to have a backup plan
Right.
because, yeah, I don't want to step on anybody's dreams at all, but like your odds of being able to make it full time as a fighter are not great. And even then, let's say you do have the skill set for it. One injury can end those plans almost instantly. So you need to have something
Right.
else. But when you get into jujitsu, if your only skill set is boxing,
Hmm.
then you have two tools right here that you
Right.
can use to inflict damage on another person.
Hmm.
With jujitsu, we have the option to end altercations without permanent damage, without
Right.
extreme violence. But we also put ourselves in the position that if extreme violence becomes necessary, then we can do that. You don't need a ton of skill to be able to sling your elbow into somebody's face if you have them down in a mounted gift wrap with their arm wrapped around their neck. You're helpless at that point,
Hmm.
but you have the option to also not do that. So when I teach self-defense seminars, I talk about them from the different kind of scenarios you run into because the odds are depending on where you live. You may not be dealing with carjackers on a daily basis or things like that, but you may run into, all right, we got the drunk uncle at the barbecue who you just need to sit down and not hurt and be like, all right,
Yeah.
Bobby, like
Yeah.
let's just chill. Everybody be cool. And using your verbiage in order to do that as well. And I think that's as I've got more into the kind of self-defense realm, we teach a bunch of seminars a year on this and dealing with more people in this kind of world. You start to realize that, yeah, like just being a badass fighter isn't enough of a skill set. It's a good place to start from,
Hmm.
but you need to understand the psychology, the verbal linguistics of it, being agile on your feet, being able to de-escalate situations, how do weapons come into play. And then my wife is actually a lawyer. She was a prosecutor for 7 years.
Wow.
So she talks a lot about kind of the legal aftermath of, okay, now you've had a violent encounter. How do you talk your way through the court process and that sort of thing?
Yeah. And my experience and observation is that most there are people who live in certain circumstances, but most
Mhm.
people in this country are not being people aren't jumping out of the bushes to fight them every day. So when we're training jujitsu, from my perspective, the most of the benefits are being translated into other parts of your life rather
Mhm.
than just self-defense. Like the self-defense becomes a metaphor for your ability to endure stress in other areas. It
Sure.
becomes tools in that regard. I think feeling the confidence of being able to handle your body differently in a physical altercation and then being in those altercations are almost two different things. I think that walking through the world going, I'm less fearful
Mm.
is most of the benefit. And then some people have sadly physical encounters that they don't expect, and then you're prepared, and that makes a lot of sense. But I feel like the primary outcomes of becoming good at fighting are less about the number of fights you win in your life, because I think most people as they go along just are not in that circumstance as much as otherwise. When you look at how I came to jujitsu late in life, I was 50 when I started. And although I think of myself as an athlete, the tools of a 50-year-old are not the same tools as a 20-year-old. And my
Sure.
body is just it's just not the same. When you look at the acquisition of jujitsu skill that and the people that you teach, you were an athlete as a kid, you were a football player, you had probably like a natural ability that then translated into that. Oh, maybe not. Okay.
No.
So yeah, how is jujitsu skill acquisition different than other skill acquisitions?
Yeah, I am not an athletic person. I've done it sports my whole life. My parents were very good about pushing me to try a lot of
Hmm.
different things. I played baseball and tennis and basketball and everything under the sun.
Okay.
We said football, lacrosse, track and field.
Wow.
And none of those I was terribly good at.
Okay.
I but I developed a pretty good work ethic early on, and I attribute that to my dad. He's been a mechanic and worked in the auto industry for a very long time.
Okay.
And it was is that mentality of I'll never be the most skilled guy on the field. I'm 5'9", right now I walk around at about 180, but I was again very light for a very long time. At my skinniest growing up, I think I was 5'6" and about 94 pounds.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
you could see my heart beating through my chest. And again, like I said, I was asthmatic. So I
Uh,
was never going to be the biggest, the strongest, the fastest, the most athletic guy on the field, but I would do my best. I would go until I break. Like I will outwork everybody.
right.
And now I understand because I'm a personal trainer full time in
Mhm.
addition to the jiu-jitsu thing, understanding like physical capacity has helped me go, okay, that's not the best thing to have every time. Right? Sometimes you need to take your foot off the gas and again,
Right.
learn to recover, learn to rest. But with jujitsu, I've actually found it's one of those pure sports. Like I love the idea because again, I played a bunch of team sports, but I
Right.
love the idea of a one-on-one sport
Hmm.
because then you get to see it's a pure contest. That's the way that
Yes.
I
Yes.
look at MMA and jiu-jitsu and all these other things of being like, if I'm again, usually a football analogy, if I'm an outside linebacker, I can't control what's happening with a defensive lineman on the other side of the field and
Right.
whether or not that affects the play and how that goes into whether or not the other team scores and so on. When it's a one-on-one competitive sport, there's nobody else to blame. Like you get
Yeah.
all the glory, but you also get all the responsibility of doing it. And that's a cool thing. It can be a lot of pressure at the same time.
Right.
And it's that I think the competition mindset, which Lisa will get to that a little bit later, is definitely different in individual sports compared to team sports. But yeah, I think for skill acquisition, I relate jujitsu very much to the ideas of whether learning to speak a language or
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
learn to play an instrument, that
Hmm.
you have to start off with little bits. Ito Portal, who was Conor
Yeah.
McGregor's movement coach, that kind of got him famous for a little while there. And again, personally, Ito's skill set is way more than what he's been given credit for. He's not just that guy with a ponytail doing touch butt in the park, I think is what Nate Diaz said. But he gave this great analogy of you learn everything through isolation, integration, then improvisation is the highest form of any skill you can have.
Hmm.
So you have to learn the individual pieces to learn how to then put them together to then be able to let them flow. So again, whether that's language or music,
Yeah. Yes.
really anything else. And the great thing with jujitsu, in addition to a lot of other sports too, but is that you need a partner in order to be really able to do it. Like you can practice movement drills on your own, you can watch videos and do all this stuff. But until you actually get your hands on a training partner and see, okay, what does it feel like when they resist? That's when you can start to find where do the wheels fall off and where does it actually work?
Yeah. Yeah. I find the Professor Lucas and I will sometimes talk about like jujitsu's the biggest individual team sport we have out there in the world because you're dependent on other people, even though to learn it and to compete, this is not something you do in a vacuum. And Ida Portal is an interesting person to me. I've followed him just a bit, and you look at somebody like that, and you always wonder if he applied himself to any given sport. Just like gymnasts, when I look at gymnasts, I think you put this gymnast in any kind of sports situation, their proprioception is so good that they'll probably pick up that sport differently. But in your skill acquisition over time, it seems like you took a body that had its limits. You weren't heavy, you weren't overly large and all that, and then you built your skills over time up into when you're doing MMA, someone's paying you, right, to go in there, which is an interesting and long journey. That's different than perhaps somebody who had a natural size and where it fit more obviously. So in your competitions, what stands out as the most memorable conflict in a fight that you've had? And for you, you might tell me something in a parking lot or an MMA cage or whatever. What's the first thing that comes to mind if I say, tell me about your most memorable fight?
I had a fight, it was one of my MMA matches, and it was one of those where I felt bad for this guy right out of the gate.
Okay.
Even though I'd only had a few matches under my belt at that point, he shows up and he has no cornerman. To my knowledge, he hadn't had any fights at that point. He had a traditional martial arts background in karate or taekwondo or one of those striking styles. So I was like, okay,
Mhm.
like I can relate to you on this. But I remember seeing him at the weigh-ins. This was a small local show,
Mhm.
and he's walking around asking if somebody there can corner him the next day. And I'm like, okay.
He's
But
on his.
it's the thing. I'm also respecting him because he looks like a strong, athletic guy,
Yeah.
and yeah, he's shown up here. that takes a ton of guts. I have tons of respect for anybody who's willing to step in the cage or ring or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
never knock on anybody for that. I hate that when you hear people who've never done anything bang somebody be like, oh, you shouldn't even be in there, that bum. And I'm like, then step up and show them. Okay. I'm not worried about this. But anyway, we get in there and yeah, we start off having, basically a high kick battle of, okay, I'll do the karate game with you a little bit.
Hmm.
And at some point I'm like, okay, I don't want to get hit anymore. I take him down. He doesn't know what he's doing. So he's just headlocking me and I get a get back mount. And I can hear even one of my cornermen yelling at me to just beat the bag out of him. And I'm
Hmm.
looking at the back of this guy's head and I'm like, I don't need to hurt this man at this
Right.
point.
Yeah.
So I get to my rear naked choke and I end it as quickly and painlessly as possible. But it was a really cool moment of, okay, because I have the higher skill level and the higher capacity for
Yeah.
violence at this
Yes.
point,
Yes.
I don't have to use it.
Yeah.
But this were, if I didn't know how to do that, then that would be my only tool again, is just smash his head in and maybe cause this guy some permanent damage
Sure.
that is totally unnecessary. And that again, I think is the beauty of jujitsu is that,
Yes.
but you have to have that capacity for violence in order to be able to go, I don't have to take it here. I can take it here.
And to me, that's a lot of self-awareness in that story because the anxiety of losing, the anxiety of it not working out, you had to have enough confidence to be like, I can do this in a way that I can control things. And I like the question about tell me about your most memorable fight because in those moments of that type of conflict, I think two things happen. You're changed in some way, and then you're also revealed in another way, in that you might not have, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth. However,
Yeah.
the capacity to be at the same time compassionate and violent in the same moment of I have control of the circumstance and I'm electing an honorable way out. I win. This person is not damaged unnecessarily. Everybody gets something good out of the circumstances. And so I guess I'd ask you that as a question, like from that most memorable fight being a pivot, either learning about yourself or something that changed in you, did you feel like either of those things happened?
I don't know if I necessarily changed or just became more aware
Yeah.
of, I think it's really difficult in a moment like that to be empathetic and you have to slow everything down in
Yeah.
order to do it. And that's, like I said, with those first couple fights where I was just going for broke the whole time, I didn't
Right.
care about what with the other guy because I was just
Sure.
trying to win, trying to survive. And once I was uh, able to slow everything down, one, my conditioning was able to go for way longer because I wasn't panicking,
Yes. Yes.
just like adrenaline going through, and then all of a sudden everything's done. Um, I was able to pace myself a lot more and be much more in control of myself. And it's
Yeah.
if I can control myself, then I'm able to control him better.
Yeah.
And found that to be an interesting shift in it. So
Yeah.
I think it just revealed more. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's to me fascinating because that self-control then got translated into control of the situation. And when you talk about not panicking, to me, now your field of vision is much larger. And in fact, a panicked person has a literally narrower field of vision, right, than a calm person. They actually
Yeah.
can, their peripheral vision is activated. And that to find that out about yourself, you'd have to be under duress. You'd have to like, okay, can I have this level of duress and then achieve this level of calm, which is part of what I observe around me as the higher level of skill each person acquires around me. And then the more intense their training becomes by virtue of the fact that they're better, the more potent of a person I feel like is around me because now they're able to control themselves in more difficult situations and try to connect their brain and their body to the needs of the moment. And as you've been around martial arts for super long time now, and as you're a teacher, do you have a favorite story of how jujitsu changed somebody around you or had an impact on their life that you might share?
Yeah. The one that always gets me is we've been running our kids program for a couple of years now. And it's a friend of mine that I used to work with. His daughter was the first child that we signed up when I started our kids
Oh,
program.
yeah.
And I was originally not planning to take any kids under 5 and she was 4 at the time. And he was like really pushing, okay, I'll take her. And she's, the tiniest kid out there. by
Yeah.
far. She still is. She's still
Okay.
with it. I mean, it is amazing. But she has an older sister by about 3 or 4 years, doubled her size. And he comes up to me after she'd been training for a few months and he goes, they used to always get into it. He goes, and the other day, big sister's pushing her around and the little one hits an arm drag, takes her back, takes her down, and then just all of a sudden looks up at dad. Just these giant eyes and just this recognition that what we've been working on works.
Yeah.
'Cause
How
that's
great is that?
when I get somebody on their first day, or if I have a class full of beginners, I'll almost always start with that. Like, we're going to do arm drags. We're going to do arm drags. We're going to get to a waist lock, and we're going to dump the person forward or backwards safely, and we're just going to work from there.
Right.
And so to see her put that into practice against her big sister, who's probably been kicking the tar out of her since they
Yeah. Right.
to now all of a sudden be like, I have the upper hand.
Yeah.
And we're just
Yeah.
those
That's a great
first
story.
few-
Yeah.
those first few months, she barely opened her mouth.
Yes.
After that, she talks my ear off every day on the mats and it's
I
just so
love to hear
cool to see that confidence come out
Yeah.
from that one counter.
Yes. Oh, that's so great to hear. Professor Lucas uses this expression frequently that, like, the folks that need a little more confidence and grit, Jiu-Jitsu will raise that part of them. And then there are other people that perhaps need to be tamped down a bit and their aggression needs to be met with a more that there's value in being calm. There may be people that want to either follow you on social media or find where you're teaching. Where might they learn about you?
Yeah. So our Instagram is balancepoint.bjj
Okay.
is our business page. I don't post much on my personal page anymore.
Sure.
Just
Okay.
'cause not really. But yeah, balancepointbjj.com. And we're in Milford, New Hampshire. And yeah, those
Great.
guys
Good.
are
Yeah, that's great. All right. I hope everybody who's listening goes and follows it. And Professor Shelby Young, thank you for spending time with us. It was great to hear your stories, and perhaps you'll come back and visit with us another time as well.
I'd love to. That'd be great.
Thank you.